Hello, my name is Sasha Layton from Sasha Yoga Life. Today I'm going to be breaking down a yoga posture called Utthita Trikonasana, otherwise known as triangle pose. So first and foremost, Trikonasana is a hip opening posture, and therefore we need to understand the basics of anatomy of the pelvis. We have the thigh bone, the long thigh bone, which is anatomically known as the femur bone, and this articulates at the socket of the hip joint, which is known as the acetabulum, and it creates a ball and socket type hip joint. And then at the top of the femur, we have what is known as the greater trochanter, which is like a very round, bony knob, which basically kind of locks up into the hip joint. And it's this actual bony point, this greater trochanter, that gets in the way of the pelvis being able to sufficiently move in Trikonasana. So, first of all, the way that it gets in the way is just with the way that we can perhaps, how we commonly hear Trikonasana cued in terms of alignment. So the first commonly taught alignment cue that you might hear is if I just take a wide Tadasana stance and then turn my right foot out. And the first commonly taught alignment cue that you might hear is to keep the whole upper body and pelvis in a shape like it's in between two panes of glass, or otherwise square the hips. And the problem that you might find with this is that you have very limited movement of the pelvis, because if you can see whether the foot is turned in or out, and you're trying to keep the hips square like it's in between two panes of glass, that you get very limited movement of the pelvis. Like, it doesn't tilt very much because we've got the greater trochanter at the top of the femur, which is knocking with the pelvis. So this is one of the first, issues with this alignment cue. What then happens is that because you only get limited movement with the pelvis, you don't get very far with this. The second alignment cue that is commonly taught is to reach this bottom arm out as far as you can go to create length in the side waist. However, by doing that, it's actually pulling on the lumbar spine and creating a shearing force in the lumbar spine, which then compresses the sacrum on the bottom side. So my right side in this example, which is the sacroiliac joint. And by trying to find length through that side waist, it's actually really, really uncomfortable, number one. Number two, I can feel that my lumbar spine is being pulled away from the sacrum, and it's feeling really compressed in that bottom part of the sacrum. So they're just two common alignment cues which perhaps aren't anatomically sufficient, and also are going to cause compensations and other issues with the pose in the body. So therefore, what we want to understand is, given that we have this anatomical structure for the pose with the femur, thigh bone, the greater trochanter having to move out of the way, not squaring the hips, we need to understand the maximal external rotation of our hip. So I'm just going to lie down on the floor here, and I'm going to grab a strap, which I recommend that you have something to be able to put around your foot. However, if you don't, then you can just keep your knee bent. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm actually going to straighten my top leg. So we come to lie down on the floor, extend the left leg out straight, and have that active, so keep the foot flexed. And then I'm going to place the strap around the ball of my right foot, which is the same foot that we're using for, same leg that we're using for the purposes of this pose. And then I'm going to lie down and start to straighten through my right leg. And then I'm going to start to take my right leg out to the side. So this pose is known as Supta Padangustasana. And I'm going to take this leg out to the side just to the point that my right hip will allow. Okay, and you'll notice that this is as far as my leg will come. So there's actually just a little bit more than a hand's distance from the floor to my leg. So this actually is the angle that I want to pay attention to in terms of how much external rotation I have in my hip, because this is the same angle that you'll be coming into for triangle pose. If I was to take this leg any further down to the ground, my hip, my left hip, the pelvis would start to lift up. You can hopefully see that from the video. So this is my maximal external rotation for my right hip. So with that in mind, I'm going to release the belt and come back up to stand in a staggered squat. And then I'm going to take a wide Tadasana or mountain pose stance, and keeping in mind the anatomical structure of my pelvis and also the common cues that I was mentioning before, which perhaps aren't ideal. I'm going to come into triangle pose with the new alignment cues. So first of all, for myself, I would encourage a wider stance. So rather than heel to heel or heel to arch, which is another alignment cue you might often hear, and that is even more difficult to get that good angle for the hip, for the back hip. I'm going to take a wider stance. So just for me, it's much better in the terms of my maximal external rotation to have the feet a little bit wider than hips distance. And then what we're looking for is now I can feel that the greater trochanter has sufficiently moved out of the way and it's created more space for my hips to start tilting further. And this is what we're looking for. So I'm just going to take a bit of a wider stance, a longer stance here. So first of all, when we turn the foot from Tadasana out to the triangle pose stance, we want to make sure that the knee, the shin, and the second toe are all in line. Okay? Once you have that, then we want to straighten the right leg, but without locking the knee. That's the second most important thing. You never want to lock the joints. This creates a lot of pressure through the joint, but it also can create you're using less muscular effort as well, which kind of defeats the purpose of the pose. So a little soft bend in the knee, and then I start to tilt my pelvis so that the left hip is facing towards the back of the room, and I can tilt much further over my right thigh bone. And then with this bottom hand, if you're still feeling like there's a little bit of crunching going on through the side waist, which there shouldn't be with the hips tilted more, you can extend the right arm up next to the ear, not out, and see if you can lengthen any further through the side waist. And then let that hand come down, and either Let the arm rest let the arm hang just in front of the leg, which will automatically switch on the abdominals and the obliques, which are the side muscles of the abdominals. Or if you're choosing to rest the hand onto the shin, make sure that you're pulling up on the shin so that, again, this starts to engage those muscles, so the abdominals and the obliques. And then we want to start to squeeze the hip extensors. So the outer hip extensor will start to switch on the left glute in this case, gluteus maximus, and this will keep the pelvis stable. The right hip extensor will keep the lower back safe. Okay, so, and it will also help with the abduction of this right leg. And then with the top arm, we're looking to take it up towards the ceiling. Whether you look up at the thumb or not, it doesn't really matter. It's just dependent on how comfortable it feels in the neck for you. But we're looking to have the arm in line with the chest and with the shoulders. So if we start to take the arm too far back, it ends up going into a back bend, which is a common misalignment of the pose. If we take the arm too far forward, we start to allow the chest to drop, which again is not a sufficient way to come into the pose. So we want to take the arm so that it's straight in line with the chest and with the shoulders. And then another stabilizing action that we're looking for is to squeeze the feet towards each other so that this switches on the intrinsic foot muscles. It will also switch on the hamstrings of the front leg, and it will switch on the hip abductors and the glutes as well. And then slowly we tilt the pelvis to lift back up, and then turn the right foot in and heel toe the feet in together. Now, there are a couple of variations in terms of how the feet are positioned for triangle pose, whether you decide to take a shorter stance in the pose or a longer stance in the pose. So I'll just explain to you a couple of different reasons why you would take one over the other. A shorter stance, so let's just say we take about this stance. A shorter stance triangle pose will be beneficial to somebody who has less hip mobility. So even when they've done the external rotation test, they might only have a limited range of movement in the hips. So the shorter stance will actually suit somebody with that kind of anatomical structure or limited mobility. The other thing that it will help with as well is that if somebody is suffering from pain in the back of the knee, then this will be a more preferred stance for them. All it means is that your pelvis won't be tilting as much, and therefore you'll be higher up with the spine. But that's okay, you're still in the stance. You're still in Trikonasana. It just means that you're taking a shorter stance, and it means that you're getting a greater stretch through the outer hip, through the abductors and through this back leg, but less of a stretch through the hamstrings. So in actual fact, anyone with super tight hamstrings also might benefit from taking a shorter stance. Taking a longer stance, so if we just expand here a little bit more, taking a longer stance will ultimately give a bigger stretch to the hamstrings, a much bigger stretch, less of a stretch on the abductors, the outer hip, but this abductor and the glutes are working harder to stay in this pose, in this variation of the pose. And then another variation could be if somebody has lower back sacrum pain, you might want to experiment with actually having the spine a little bit further forward of the thigh. So rather than being further back and then talking through and rotating through the spine, you might choose to just have the spine a little bit further forward so that there's less twisting and torquing on the lower back. Just making sure that we're not bringing this top arm forward as well, so then we're starting to arch through the spine, that we're still upright and still in the pose, but it's just a little, creates a little bit more space. And then coming back up. So there are just a few different variations and alignment tips and cues and reasons as to why some alignment cues might not be so beneficial in triangle pose compared to the ones that I just showed you. So have a go, try it out, and I'd love to hear what you think. Thank you very much. Namaste.